Kennel 14, Mario said. Service ID M774. He gets the Hills ID formula, not the standard blend. It causes gastric upset. The intake coordinator stopped typing. Her hands stayed over the keys but didn't move. She looked up at the man across the counter, wheat-colored work shirt, untucked, collar open, a dented steel thermos held loosely in both hands, and whatever she had been about to say about visiting hours died somewhere behind her teeth. He hadn't raised his voice, hadn't leaned in. He just said it, the way a man recites coordinates, because that's exactly what it was. Across the lobby, Martin Cardenas had a folder open against his chest and was watching. He didn't close it. He didn't move toward the counter. He just watched the older man, this nobody who'd walked in off the street on the morning of a welfare review and delivered the intake brief before anyone had asked him a single question. The intake coordinator looked down at her screen, then back up at him. She didn't ask how he knew the kennel number. People who ask questions like that are people who've never heard a man recite information the way Mario Fuchs recited it, not from memory exactly, but from somewhere deeper than memory. From the part of the brain that doesn't sleep. She said she'd need to pull up the review schedule. She said he should take a seat. He nodded once and turned toward the waiting area. That's where you'd have seen it if you'd been watching. He reached the doorway between the front counter and the lobby standard interior doorway. Nothing remarkable, and he stopped. One beat. His eyes went left, tracked right, settled center. The whole thing took maybe a second and a half. Then his body followed his eyes through the threshold, unhurried, like crossing was a decision he'd already made before he moved. He chose a chair against the wall, not the nearest one, not the most comfortable, the one with sightlines to both the entry and the hallway to the assessment wing. He sat down with the economy of a man who has spent a long time making himself small in rooms where being noticed was a liability. Then he set the thermos on the chair beside him. It was steel, dented badly on one side, the kind of dent that comes from a fall onto something harder than the ground concrete maybe, or the steel deck of a vehicle. The finish had long since gone to a dull matte, rubbed clean at the lip and the handle where hands had found it 10,000 times. There was something scratched into the steel near the base. Scratched in and then scratched through. You could read the shape of the letters if the light was right. HECTOR. And then a series of rough lateral lines across them, worn smooth now with handling, so it was neither legible nor gone. He'd made coffee at 4 in the morning, before he left. 4 in the morning the way he used to, before every mission brief percolator, not drip, because that's what the forward operating base had, and some habits outlast the conditions that created them. He'd stood in his kitchen in the dark and watched the light on the machine and thought about the drive. 4 hours and change, according to the map. He'd given himself 5 because his back was what it was since the blast, and he'd need to stop once. He'd learned about the welfare review from a retired handler network, an email chain, the kind that circulates through people who've been out long enough that they've stopped apologizing for how much they care. Someone had flagged Hector's file. Declining responsiveness, the report said. Possible neurological compromise. Final welfare review scheduled. Mario had read the email twice. Then he'd closed the laptop and started the percolator. He hadn't called ahead, hadn't emailed, hadn't asked permission. There was no official standing here. He understood that. The Army had transferred Hector to a contractor kennel program 5 years ago, and the paperwork had never included Mario's name as a contact. As far as this facility was concerned, he was a member of the public. A walk-in. He looked at the thermos. The scratched-out name caught the flat fluorescent light of the waiting room and gave nothing back. When he'd scratched it in, he'd been keeping hope somewhere he could carry it. When he'd scratched it through, he hadn't been able to decide if that was grief or something worse, the specific kind of failure that comes from staying quiet when you should have fought. He hadn't thrown the thermos away. He hadn't been able to do that either. He wrapped both hands around it now, not drinking, just holding it the way a man holds something that belongs to a question he hasn't answered yet. Martin Cardenas sat watching from across the lobby. not moving, not looking away. The intake coordinator came back to the desk after about 10 minutes. She had a manila folder with her this time, and she set it down without looking at it, which told Mario she already knew what was in it. Mr. Fuchs. She kept her voice low, professional. I do have to let you know, Hector is flagged for a final welfare assessment today. The reviewing vet will determine placement eligibility. I know, Mario said. She paused. You know, that's why I'm here. She held his gaze a beat, then glanced down at the folder. The flag was issued after 3 consecutive failed integration tests. He's shown what the notes describe as unpredictable stress responses to new handlers and unfamiliar environments. Twice, he went completely unresponsive. The second time, the attending staff couldn't get him back for nearly 40 minutes. She slid the folder a half-inch toward him without opening it. And today is the final review. If the welfare assessment doesn't show baseline responsiveness and handler bond potential, the recommendation goes to the director. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Mario didn't move. His breathing didn't change. His eyes went to the door at the far end of the lobby, the one with the wire-reinforced glass and the authorized personnel placard, and rested there a few seconds before coming back to her. What time does the assessment start? 9:15. Dr. Patel is already in the wing, and I'm not authorized to be in the assessment room. Not at this time, no. I'm sorry. You can wait here. He nodded once, thanked her, picked up the thermos, and went back to his chair. The lobby had filled some since he'd arrived. A family with 2 kids was looking at adoption binders at the far table. A woman with a terrier mix on a short lead sat near the window. Normal Tuesday morning sounds, the hum of the air handler overhead, the soft shuffle of papers, a dog barking somewhere down a corridor and then going quiet. Mario sat with his back to the wall, not against it far enough that he could stand without pushing off, close enough that nothing could come from behind. He set the thermos on the chair beside him. He turned it so the scratched face was toward him. The letters that used to spell a name then didn't anymore. He'd done that himself the week after the transfer papers came through, sat at his kitchen table at 2 a.m. and worked at it with the back edge of his house key until the name was gone. He thought it would help. It hadn't. What it did was make the thermos into something he couldn't put down and couldn't explain, and so he kept carrying it 4 years now, the way you carry a debt you don't know how to pay. He'd learned about the welfare flag 3 days ago. A message on the retired handler listserv, brief, factual, the way those messages always were, because the men and women who sent them had learned not to editorialize. Dog's name, service number, facility, date of final assessment. That was all. No action requested. No one expected him to drive 800 miles round trip for a dog the Army had already decided it was finished with. He'd made coffee at 4 a.m. anyway. He'd filled the thermos. He'd been on the road before 5. He wasn't sure what he was going to say when he got here. He wasn't any closer to knowing now. But he knew that Hector had done 3 tours without ever failing an alert, and he knew that whatever the dog was doing in that assessment room, it wasn't a stress response. And he knew with the particular certainty of a man who has never been wrong about this one thing, that if no one in that building understood the difference, Hector was going to die today for a reason that wasn't a reason at all. His hand closed around the thermos. Martin Cardenas hadn't moved from across the lobby. Martin crossed the lobby the way men do when they've decided to handle something not fast, not angry, just purposeful in that particular way that says the conversation is already scripted in their head before they open their mouth. Mr. Fuchs. He said it like he'd looked up the name on a form. Not hostile, just establishing that he had the form and Mario didn't. Martin Cardenas. He extended a hand. I coordinate the volunteer and adoption program here. You spoke with Aaron at the counter. Mario shook it, two-handed for just a second, the way he always contacted anything grip, settle, release. Martin noticed it and wasn't sure what to make of it. I want to be straightforward with you, Martin said. Hector's case is already in the assessment process. We have a qualified veterinary assessor working the evaluation today, and we have an adoption candidate already in review a qualified placement. He paused to let that land. I'm not sure who put you in contact with us, but I want to make sure you understand the formal process before we... I'm not here through the formal process, Mario said. Martin waited for more. There wasn't any. Right. A small adjustment in his posture, like a man recalibrating. So then, you understand you don't have standing in the review, not officially. I say that not to be difficult, I say it because Hector has had 3 failed placement evaluations in 14 months. And at this point, we are operating under welfare guidelines that prioritize the animal's quality of life. We have a process. I know what the welfare guidelines say. With respect, you drove here from... Martin glanced at something in his hand, a single index card, out of state. Based on an email chain from a retired handler group. He said email chain with the weight of a man describing hearsay. That's not documentation. That's not a formal request. And our assessor has been working with Hector for 6 weeks. She has records. She has a professional relationship with the animal. Mario set the thermos down on the chair beside him, unhurried. The dent on the side caught the fluorescent light for a moment, the scratched steel just below the grip, lines that were clearly letters, clearly crossed out. 6 weeks, Mario said. That's correct. Where was he before the 6 weeks? Martin paused. He was transferred from a contractor kennel facility in Lawton, Oklahoma. Mario said it without inflection. Before that, Fort Campbell. Before that, a contractor facility in Bagram. Before Fort Campbell, he was in theater. He picked up the thermos again. I know where he was. I want to know if anyone here does. Martin's jaw moved slightly. The index card lowered an inch. I appreciate that you have history with the animal, he said carefully. I do. But seniority of relationship doesn't confer standing in an active welfare proceeding. We have a candidate. You have a dog that 3 assessors couldn't read. The lobby was quiet enough that the intake coordinator behind the counter could clearly hear them. Martin didn't look at her. Our current assessor is very qualified, he said, and there was an edge now, thin but present, the edge of a man who has championed this program for 3 years and does not enjoy having it discussed in a waiting room. And the candidate we're reviewing for placement is an exceptional animal, younger, stable behavioral profile, highly suitable for public engagement. Hector's file is what it is. Mario studied him for a beat, not measuring, not threatening, just patient, in the way that long experience makes a person patient, not because they've accepted the situation, but because they've been in harder rooms than this one, and they know that arguing a closed door louder doesn't open it. I'd like to observe the assessment, he said. That's not standard. I know. Martin held his gaze. I'll see what I can do, he said finally, in a tone that meant he wouldn't. He walked back toward the corridor with the index card still in his hand. Martin didn't walk far. He stopped near the corridor entrance, turned back, and for a moment, Mario thought the man had reconsidered something. He hadn't. He just decided that whatever he'd left unsaid the first time was worth saying. You know what this facility has invested in the last 18 months? Martin asked. Not really a question. He came back a few steps, hands loose at his sides, his voice carrying just enough volume that the intake coordinator behind the counter could hear. We've got a 4-year-old Malinois named Argo. Active service, deployed twice, full behavioral assessment completed, cleared by 2 independent evaluators. He's going into the showcase next week. Media coverage. County Commissioner's office is involved. Mario set the thermos on his knee. Argo's young. He's manageable. He's got good years ahead of him. Martin paused, and what came next was the real point. Hector is 11 years old. He's been in a contractor kennel program for 4 years with minimal human contact. He came to us flat. He won't engage. He won't eat consistently. He let a beat pass." Unquote. I've been doing this for 7 years. I know what that presentation means. "What does it mean?" Mario asked. Martin's expression shifted, not cruel, not unkind, but certain. The certainty of a man who had built a program around a clear-eyed understanding of limits and who had long since made peace with what that required. It means the dog is suffering. It means his nervous system is damaged past the point where adoption is humane. It means, sometimes, the most compassionate thing you can do. "I know what it means," Mario said. His voice was quiet, no heat in it, and Martin registered something in the flatness of it and stopped. "I'm not here to disrupt your program," Mario said. "I'm not here to embarrass anyone. I'm here because I got an email from a handler network 3 days ago that said Hector's final review was today. And I drove through the night to be sitting in this chair before that review started." He looked at the thermos for a moment, not picking it up. That's all I'm here to do." Martin studied him. The index card remained in his hand. "Your emotional connection to this dog is real," he said, and he meant it as a kind thing, which made it harder to hear. "But it doesn't change his clinical picture, and it doesn't give you standing in the evaluation." He turned and walked back down the corridor. This time, he kept going. The intake coordinator found something on her desk that needed attention. The waiting area went quiet, except for the low hum of the HVAC overhead and the distant sound of a dog barking 2 wings away, not Hector's wing, some other dog with some other problem today. Mario put his thumb along the scratch channel on the thermos. The steel there was rough, raised where the tool had cut in, and the scratch-through ran across the middle of the name at a slight angle, the way it does when your hand isn't steady and you do it anyway. He'd had the thermos in his hand when he did it, standing in the parking lot of his unit's rear detachment, watching a contractor's vehicle pull away. He hadn't been able to stop the transfer. He told himself it was because the paperwork was already through, because Hector was technically Army property, because there was no mechanism. All of that was true. None of it was the whole truth. He set the thermos back on the chair beside him. Outside, past the lobby's glass front doors, and across 60 feet of striped asphalt, a black government-plated SUV pulled smoothly into the visitor lot and stopped. The driver cut the engine. The passenger doors opened, and 2 men in uniform stepped out into the flat morning light. Neither of them looked toward the lobby yet. "The recommendation is already written," Martin said. His voice had settled into something almost patient, the tone of a man explaining traffic patterns to someone who'd already missed the turn. "The assessment team doesn't change direction because a former handler drives in from wherever and asks nicely. That's not how this works." Mario didn't answer. He was watching Martin's mouth move the way you watch weather, not because you can stop it, but because knowing what's coming is its own kind of preparation. Martin drew breath to continue. The door to the assessment wing opened. It was one of the younger staff members, a woman in scrubs with a lanyard swinging against her chest, and her face had that particular compression that means the news is bad and she hasn't decided how to say it yet. "Mr. Cardenas." She stopped 2 steps into the lobby. "Dr. Reyes is asking for you. The dog, Hector, he's gone completely flat, non-responsive. She's saying we need to make a call." The word call landed like weight. Martin turned to her, and for one beat the professional mask slipped. Mario saw it, a flicker of something that was not quite calculation and not quite concern, but somewhere between. Then Martin straightened. "Tell her I'll be right there." He looked back at Mario, and there was something almost relieved in it, the look of a man whose argument has just been made for him by circumstances. "This is why the process exists," he said. "Sometimes they can't come back." Mario was already on his feet. Not fast, no wasted motion. He picked up the thermos with one hand, capped it with the other, and tucked it under his arm the way you secure equipment before a move. "I need to see him." "You don't have clearance to be in the assessment wing." "Then walk me in." Martin held his position for exactly 2 seconds. Then the front door opened. The sound came first one clean metallic note as the push bar engaged, and then the two uniformed figures stepped through into the lobby. The fluorescent light caught the uniform's embroidered patches, the captain's bars, the clean press of a service dress worn by someone who'd put it on for a specific reason this morning. Sean Kuhn was 32. He had the posture of someone trained to walk into rooms and read them fast, and he read this one in about 3 seconds. His gaze moved across the counterstaff, across Martin standing with his arms crossed and his jaw set, and then it crossed another 15 feet and found the man in the wheat-colored shirt standing with a dented thermos under his arm. He stopped, not because he was uncertain, because something had surfaced that he hadn't expected to surface today in this place, under these lights. Master Sergeant Fuchs. He didn't say it loudly. He said it the way you say a name you haven't said in a long time but have never lost. The intake coordinator looked up. One of the counter staff turned. Martin's mouth was still slightly open from his last syllable, the word clearance having apparently evaporated somewhere between his teeth. Mario turned to face Sean with the same unhurried economy he brought to everything, the whole weight of him settling into the move, without urgency, without theater. "Captain," he said. Just that, 2 syllables. Level, level. Behind Sean, through the still open door, the second figure was crossing the threshold, and he wore a star on his shoulder. And he was looking at the man in the wheat-colored shirt with an expression that was starting to do what expressions do when they're about to change completely. And somewhere past the door to the assessment wing, in a room Mario had not yet reached, a retired Belgian Malinois was lying flat on a concrete floor, and the facility's veterinarian was reaching for a phone. "Master Sergeant Fuchs." Sean Kuhn said it. The way you say a name you've been carrying around in your memory, not loud, not performing it for the room, just certain. The way you say something true. Mario turned. His head moved first, then his body unhurried. The way a man moves when he already knows what he's going to find. Sean was maybe 30, dress uniform, captain's bars, crossing the lobby at a pace that made the receptionist step back from her counter. He stopped 2 feet from Mario, and his hand came out, open, direct. "I didn't know you'd be here, Sergeant. I should have guessed." Martin Cardenas stopped mid-sentence. Whatever he'd been about to say something about the assessment team's timetable, something about procedure, it died in his mouth. He looked at Sean. He looked at Mario. He looked at the star on the shoulder of the man coming through the door behind Sean, and his hand tightened on the folder of paperwork. General Albanese walked in without ceremony, no announcement. His aide stepped aside, and the general moved to Sean's shoulder and read the room the way men at that level read rooms fast and complete. "Captain," he said, "who is this?" Sean didn't hesitate. "Sir, this is Mario Fuchs, Master Sergeant retired, 20th anniversary of the 759th Ordnance Company. He spent 8 years attached to EOD. He was the primary handler for a Belgian Malinois designated Hector to explosive detection. They cleared routes in Kandahar and later in Mosul. The Karadak corridor, sir. The secondary device recovery on Route Pluto in 2011. That was him. That was his dog." The general's eyes moved to Mario. Something shifted in them. Not surprise, exactly. More like the opposite of surprise, the moment when information you already hold in one part of your mind meets information from another part, and they confirm each other. "Route Pluto," the general said. "Yes, sir. The device under the culvert. Hector found it, sir. I pulled it." Albanese extended his hand. Not for show. Just one man acknowledging another across a distance that couldn't be measured in rank. Mario took it. The handshake lasted exactly as long as it needed to, and no longer. The lobby had gone quiet. Not the polite quiet of people being discreet, the total quiet of people who have stopped pretending to do other things. The receptionist. The 2 adoption counselors by the bulletin board. The staff member who had come to deliver news about Hector and was now frozen in the doorway to the assessment wing with the worst possible update caught somewhere in her throat. Martin stood to Mario's left with the folder in his hands. and his face had done something complicated. The professional certainty, the coordinator's authority, the careful architecture of a program he'd built, it hadn't collapsed. It had just gone very, very quiet. He was looking at Mario the way you look at something when you realize the measurements you used were wrong from the start. General Albanese didn't speak again right away. He let the moment settle. Then he looked at the staff member in the doorway. "What's the situation with the dog?" She blinked, looked at Mario, looked at the general. "Sir, the dog in the assessment wing. He's gone completely unresponsive. The veterinarian she's recommending immediate." Mario was already moving. He picked up the thermos from the chair beside him, two-handed, unhurried, and crossed toward the assessment wing door without asking permission. He paused at the threshold. One beat. Eyes. Left, right, center. Then he pushed through. The assessment room was small. Fluorescent light, concrete floor, a metal exam table bolted to the wall. Hector was in the far corner. Mario saw him before he saw anything else. The dog was flat, not lying down the way a sick animal collapses flat like a plank, chest pressed to the floor, chin forward, eyes locked on a fixed point in the middle distance. Every muscle loaded. Not a twitch, not a blink. The veterinarian was already talking. Something about cerebellar function, about loss of voluntary movement, about the kindness of not waiting. Her voice was practiced and careful and completely wrong. Mario put one hand on the doorframe. How long has he been like that? Approximately 20 minutes. He was alert during intake, and then he just... Who else has been in this room? The vet looked at the coordinator beside her. The coordinator looked at her intake sheet. The assessor, a kennel tech, and the maintenance staff. They were replacing a drain cover when we brought him in. Is the maintenance worker still in the building? He went back to the utility corridor, I think. "Get him out of the building," Mario said. "Through the front. Don't bring him back through this wing." Martin was behind Mario in the doorway. "You can't just walk in here and start giving orders." "He's not sick." Mario's voice was flat and even. He didn't raise it. He didn't turn around. He's on alert. The room went quiet. Mario crouched down, bringing himself level with the floor, level with Hector's eyeline. He didn't move toward the dog. He just lowered himself, slowly, settling his weight onto his heels the way a man learns to when he expects to hold a position for a long time. His hands rested on his knees, unhurried, open. "It's a passive alert," he said, still to the room, not to Hector. He was trained to go flat and lock. No bark, no scratch, no signal. Just freeze and hold the point. It's what he does when he finds buried ordnance. Someone in this room tracked an explosive compound. Most likely PETN or TATP residue from a worksite, the kind of trace that gets into boot soles and doesn't wash out clean. He looked up at the vet. "What's the maintenance crew been doing this week?" She was already reaching for her phone. Her face had changed. "Check the county road project on Harbor," Mario said. 2 miles east. They've been cutting through old fill." The coordinator left at a near run. 30 seconds later, through the glass partition, Mario could see her talking to the maintenance worker in the corridor, pointing toward the front of the building, the man nodding, moving that direction. Sean Kuhn stepped aside to let him pass, and then looked back through the glass at Mario. Mario turned back to Hector. The dog had not moved, eyes still locked, every tendon in his neck wound tight. Mario let out a slow breath. Then, in a voice barely above a murmur, not the command voice, not the handler voice, just a voice, the one he used at the end of a long route when the work was done and the dog deserved to hear it. "Ows." 1 beat. 2. Hector's ears moved first. A fractional rotation, finding the sound. Then his head lifted, chin coming up off the floor. His eyes found Mario's face and stayed there. His tail moved once, slow, like something waking up from a very long sleep. The veterinarian made a sound, not a word, just an exhale, and her hand went to her mouth. "He's been doing his job," Mario said quietly, still watching the dog. He's been doing it for weeks, and nobody knew to tell him he could stop. Hector's nose found Mario's knee. Not urgently, just a slow press. The dog checking that the hand was still there, that the voice that had said the release word was still attached to a body. Mario let his palm rest on the side of the dog's head. Neither of them moved much. The room was quiet, in the way rooms get quiet after something has just been narrowly avoided. Sean Kuhn was in the doorway. He'd come through with the general and then stayed back during the alert, reading the situation the way a good aide learns to watching without crowding. Now he stepped inside, looked at Mario crouched on the floor with a Belgian Malinois pressed against his leg, and asked the question without preamble. Why'd you drive all this way? For a dog the army already decided it was finished with? It wasn't a challenge. It was genuine. The kind of question you only ask someone you trust to answer honestly. Mario didn't look up right away. His hand moved once along Hector's neck, slow, deliberate, and the dog's ear turned toward him the way it always had, that small swivel of attention. Then Mario looked at the glass partition, at the room they'd just come from, at the shape of the thing this place had almost done today, without understanding what it was looking at. He didn't decide that, Mario said. I did, when I let them take him. He paused, not for effect, because it cost something to say. I'm here to undo that, he. The thermos was on the floor beside his right boot, where he'd set it when he knelt down. The dented steel caught the fluorescent light, and the scratched-out name not gone, just crossed through, still legible if you knew it was there faced up. Sean looked at it, then at Mario. He didn't say anything, which was the right answer. Martin Cardenas was at the counter. He'd been there since they came back through, his adoption program binder open in front of him, and for the first time all day, he wasn't speaking. He had the form in his hand, the standard transfer paperwork, the same form his showcase MWD had gone through, and he set it on the counter with the pen laid across it. He didn't announce it. He didn't make it into anything. He just put it there. Mario rose from the floor. Not fast, not slow, just the controlled economy of a man who has gotten up from a lot of different floors in a lot of different countries. Hector moved with him, shoulder close to Mario's knee, and that was answer enough about whose dog this was. General Albanese had not left the doorway. He watched Mario cross to the counter, pick up the pen, and begin filling out the form. 2 hands on the pen, unhurried. The same deliberateness he brought to everything, every surface, every object, the unlearnable habit of a man who had spent years making careful decisions in places where carelessness had permanent consequences. Mario signed where the form asked for a signature. He printed his name below it, the letters even and clear. He picked up the thermos from the floor on his way back, tucked it under his arm, and he stood there a moment, looking at the crossed-out name, not at the scratch marks, but through them, at the letters still underneath. Hector, still there, had always been there. He unclipped the pen from the form and, with the same 2-fingered care, scratched 3 small letters into the steel below the crossed-out name. Not over it, below it, a new line. He didn't show anyone what he'd written. He didn't need to. He capped the pen, returned it to the counter, and looked down at the dog. Okay, he said. Hector's tail moved. Mario's truck pulled out of the facility lot just after 9 in the morning, the sun still low and flat against the windshield. Hector sat upright in the passenger seat, nose pressed to the 2-inch gap Mario had left in the window. His ears pitched forward into the moving air, reading everything, the cold, the exhaust, the open fields beginning to replace the parking lots. He didn't look back at the facility. Neither did Mario. The drive home would take 4 hours. The same 4 hours it had taken to get here, except now the passenger seat wasn't empty. On the console between them sat the thermos. Dented along one side, the steel gone dull where a hand had gripped it 10,000 mornings. If you looked close enough, you could still see both markings, the name scratched in years ago and the scratch-through that came after. 2 decisions, neither one erased. just layered on top of each other, the way most things that matter actually are. Somebody drove 4 hours without being invited. Somebody showed up without standing, without paperwork, without anything but 30 years of knowing one dog's posture better than most people know their own name. That's the drive worth making. Every time.